Hello and welcome. My name is Nicole Murphy. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I think I say that at the start of every single one of these interviews, but today I'm chatting with my very, very good friend, Kasia Bradford. We have a friendship that is very, very, very honest. I would say we've told each other some hard truths many a times, and I'm so excited to talk to her today about how we've cultivated this friendship, how we give each other feedback, and she's just helped me so much in my life. Let me see here. Oh, I think I just invited her. Hold on a second. She's helped me so much in my life. She's coached me through big life changes, um, through overcoming fears. Kasia, we're here. We're good.
We're good.
Amazing. Okay, I was just telling people how amazing you are. Hope that's okay.
Well, thank you. You're amazing too.
Kasia has transformed her life, and I mean, maybe just give people a little bit of a taste of who you used to be and who you are now before we dive into this. As comfortable as you are with that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So, I mean, who I used to be. I used to be a very insecure, shy, just no confidence, wouldn't use my voice, stayed quiet, people pleasing tendencies, codependent, all of the things. All of the things. I would even say manipulative and exhibiting a lot of those kinds of behaviors. I was very good at reading people, so I knew how to manipulate situations. So that was definitely my go-to. And along the way, obviously, I attracted people that reflected that back to me. And so my life wasn't great, and I wasn't feeling good about who I was. Obviously, there was lack of congruence of my authentic self versus how I was showing up in the world. And so I embarked in a transformation journey many years ago. But I have to say the last 2 years have been like probably like on jet fuel. You know my story. So just going through a really, really intense leadership transformation program, and now working with that company, contracting there. So just, yeah, completely different person. Like, can stand in my power. I know what I want. I know who I am. That's the biggest thing. I'm using my voice speaking to you today. So that's not something that you would have ever seen me do 15 years ago.
Oh, I love it. And Kasia and I met each other in a coaching program, in a business program.
Yes.
And that was just before the pandemic, or it was at the very beginning. It was 2020, January 2020. Yeah. And then the coaching program was from January 2020 to March 2020. But I feel like we've known each other for so long. And again, out of all my friends, I have some very solid friends, obviously, but I'd say we give each other the toughest truths in a lot of ways.
Yes.
I have a handful of friends who and family that this is reality with. But I mean, we've talked about things that we've disagreed on. We have told each other things that we knew we would not want to hear. And both of you and I have tended in the past to be people pleasing, which I want to just state this really quickly. That is a manipulation.
Yes.
When you're trying to tell people what they want to hear to be liked,
yes.
that actually makes you not that trustworthy. And I recognize that in myself. So let's just get started. Like, why do you think feedback is important? Why do you think that is important to say hard truths to people?
So let me just back up, if you don't mind, just like on the idea of feedback. So I think like a lot of people, when they hear the word feedback, they automatically go to it's either good or bad. And if we can just look at feedback as neutral, with love, and in the way of giving it, seeing the person that you're giving it to in a way that I'm sharing, I'm willing to be vulnerable, I'm willing to be authentic with the person I'm giving feedback to, because I believe it's for their highest growth, expansion, whatever you want to call it. And then also with feedback, it doesn't always have to land when you're the person that the feedback is being given to. If it doesn't land, you just go, oh, okay, well, that's not landing for me, and it's cool. But when there is something there, then you get curious about it. So why is it important? I think it's so important is because we live in this culture that's walking on eggshells and we don't want to upset anybody. And how do we grow? We all have blind spots. We don't see those blind spots. So, I mean, like, I've been in this work for so long, you've been in this work for so long, and we give each other feedback because I don't see my shit. So that's what's important.
I know it's so easy to see other people's stuff. It's
Yeah.
so easy. And sometimes I think, oh, when you come from, because both you and I come from childhoods where we maybe had to grow up a little bit faster and be mature in certain ways. So you become very hypervigilant at seeing everybody else's stuff.
Yes.
And I think that that's been part of my addiction, to avoid actually looking at my stuff. But it takes trust to trust somebody's sharing the feedback from love.
Yes.
Right? So what's the difference in your opinion? Because there's sometimes people who give feedback and it's not because they're intending for your greatest, highest good. They actually want to hurt you, or it's from a place of them needing something. It's from a place of neediness or trauma projection. How do you filter that out?
So I think the one key thing that you said, the trust piece. So when you're asking for feedback, I would say that the most valuable feedback is when we already established an agreement between the two people that we are open to giving and receiving each other feedback. Because I think the other thing that you see a lot in the culture today is that people are like, well, I'm just telling you my truth. I'm being me. It's like, this is my truth. I'm speaking my truth. Well, you don't have to be mean. So it's like, you know, that saying, say what you mean, but you don't have to be mean. So it's and then I guess that's oh my god, what was the question? See, I go on a tangent.
No, good.
Yeah, the trust piece, right? Like, so we don't take feedback from everybody. Like, we get to discern, and we actually get to make agreements ahead of time. And you and I did that, where we ask permission. Like, I don't just go fly with you with that. Here you go. It's like, okay, do I have your permission? Like, do you want to hear what I'm seeing? It doesn't have to land, but we have an agreement.
It's true. And then something else that we do is, both you and I, again, because we're traditionally like very like, okay, I'm gonna say this.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're like,
I still love you.
we're like, can I tell you something I'm seeing? But then what we do is we open up and I think both of us both say, after giving feedback, does this land for you?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this? How are you feeling in your body? And it's really coming from, I want to hit this home. It's not that I need anything from you. I think that's where it is. It's like, I don't need you to change for me to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm genuinely saying these things because I want your life to be the fullest, and I feel that way from you.
Yes, exactly.
That's harder around family.
Yes, yes. I will say I'm still working on that. It's continuous work in progress. I still, for me, find myself withholding feedback, maybe because we don't have an agreement. Now that I'm talking to you about it, I don't know that we've had a conversation about establishing that agreement. And so it's almost about managing feelings because we're used to the responses that we get from our parents, let's say. Like, we know how they respond. We've been around, well, for me, like 40 plus years. So I know how my mom responds, for example. So it's not, that's really good. I'm going to make an agreement. See? We're learning in the process.
And someone can say that they don't want to have that agreement with you.
That's right. And that's okay.
That's feedback for you.
Yes.
To see what that friendship is. But I don't think you can have true intimacy and depth in relationship without feedback. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. You go. Tell me what you think about that. Why that is.
Because that's where trust is built, and that's where investment is made. If someone's not willing to take this is what I heard recently, something along these lines. Like, if someone's not willing to risk losing you, like them, losing you in their life, things like that, for what they truly think is best for you,
mm-hmm.
That's, I think, actual loving sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it has to, again, and this is where it gets like, being self-aware around trauma and trauma projection gets very important. If you're just like, you need to be this way for me, or like, you know, if you're reacting from trauma, that's very different. You can still give that feedback, and then again, to have a help, to have that conversation is really good. It's not to hold it back, but yeah, that's where depth and intimacy is really formed, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's the intimacy for sure. Because if I'm withholding what's going on inside of me and not, again, from a place of needing something from you, but just being genuinely caring for your well being, for your expansion, whatever that looks like. If I don't share that with you, then I make it about me. Like, why am I not sharing? That's feedback for me. Why am I not sharing this? Because I'm scared, I'm uncomfortable, I might not want to lose you. So then I make it about me. I'm not no longer focused on you and what you are capable of, what your potential is. I'm now shrinking back and not potentially pointing out a blind spot that's present for you because I'm scared.
I'm so glad you said that, because withholding can be just as much as trauma projection as like hostile conversation, if that's what it is. But to be fair too, sometimes people will, again, you need to let go of expectation of someone taking your feedback and implementing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that is not a reflection on you.
That's right. That's right. And that's not the point of feedback. The point of feedback is not to make yourself right about something. Oftentimes we want to make ourselves right about it. And sometimes, it's like oftentimes with clients or even with my partner, I don't know that you've said that to me, but I'll give feedback and then they will say, yeah, you're right. And it's like, no, I don't want to be right. It's not about being right. Just look at how it's landing for you. And if it rings true for you, then yeah, like, go ahead, get curious about it and address it, whatever that looks like. But I'm not telling you this to be right. Like, it's not about making anybody right or wrong.
Okay, so I just want to bring this up because this is interesting. Chris Voss, in his book, the negotiation book.
Oh yes, never split the difference.
Yeah, never split the difference. He says, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, but when people say you're right, it's actually like a people pleasing shut down the conversation. If they say that's right, they're in the conversation. But I know why that would be triggering, because when someone says you're right, it's like, okay, well, that actually can cut off that deeper, intimate conversation that perhaps needs to or gets to take place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to address that right away. When somebody says that, comes back at your feedback with you're right, it's like, okay, well, but that's not what this is about. Let's look at it. Like, let's look at it deeper. Did it land? Okay, like, what's landing? It's like, I'm not trying to be right here. That's not what the point of this is. So yeah, I would agree.
So why do you think people, because that almost is an avoidant thing. So why do you think people avoid giving and or receiving feedback?
Well, I'll start with receiving. Let me start with receiving. So being in environments now for a while where that is just the culture of honest feedback, constructive feedback, that's not always like, that does get you, like, it triggers you on some level. So we don't want to receive it because it's that whole thing of like, if it lands, then there is something there. And when then you get to do something about it. And so all of a sudden that puts us in a state of, it lives in our mind. It's like a closed loop because now somebody brought it to our attention and it's always there. And if we're not going to address it, it's just like you start creating this incongruence again, which is not a comfortable place to be, and not from a standpoint of like that we don't want to be uncomfortable. Of course, we want to be pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. But this is a different type of uncomfortableness I'm talking with. It's like, that's why I think people shy away from hearing it, because then they feel like they might be called to task to step up and play a bigger game, and maybe they're not ready for it yet.
Yeah. It's the, once you hear, something that does resonate, you've been opened up to that truth. You can't unknow that information.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think with giving, it comes back to what we were just talking about a little bit, is fear. Like, what will they think of me? Am I going to lose this friendship? Is this going to turn into a fight? I can't predict what's going to happen. I'm scared of what their reaction might be. So now, depending on what our comfort is with maybe confrontation, a little bit of conflict. Like we're afraid of these things. So I think that that's a lot of us pull back and don't say the things. And I think that's why the agreement helps so much, because we really talk about that ahead of time so that we don't get into a combative, like it's not an argument. It's not about being an argument. It's about being in service to the other person, again, for their expansion.
What are some practical things people can do to start cultivating relationships where there's a culture of feedback?
Whew. Practical things. Culture of feedback. I think that I would definitely, it's got to start in the home. Now, that's the safest and the most scary place, and where you get to be most gentle. So you get to practice, and I really do believe that the agreement is the biggest part. So in any culture, like whether you're in a work environment culture or your home or your friendship group, having that conversation and having an agreement that, hey, are we on board? Like, do we want to start cultivating this? Like, people have to get on board, right? So if we're in a group of 10 friends and 3 are like, no freaking way, I want no part of this, well, we're not going to build that culture. So then we get to look at that. So I think that's always going to be the first step. It's having a conversation that, hey, we'd want to bring this to our lives. Like, this would serve us. And hearing each other and getting into agreement, or alignment is a better word. Like, not everybody has to agree, because maybe the people who are like, I don't want any part of it, maybe once they are in there, maybe they're aligned to be still a part of that, and then they'll see the value and come around. So alignment, I guess, it's better than agreement.
I like that. And yeah, it's not like tribalism. It's not like everybody has to be doing this.
Yeah.
But again, I want to go back. You said like the softness, this gentleness. So what is the difference between like criticism? Because I've been in environments where there's lots of criticism, and it feels like you feel like you're shutting down. There's increased self-doubt. It just feels so horrible. I grew up with that. And then I've been in friendships or environments where there's like a very open culture of feedback and growth, and it feels expansive. It feels like I can be more of who I am. Mm-hmm. So what is the difference?
The difference is in how we say it. And so I think that for a long time we've heard about like, speak from your feelings, how you're feeling. And then I think we confuse what feelings are. So it's like, I feel like you're doing, that's not I don't feel like, that's not a feeling, right? So we kind of like messed all of that up. Like, we're going into I feel, and then we add like, and all of a sudden you're not in a feeling. So, and this, I honestly just learned this in the last years going through transformation work, taking ownership of your experience. So my experience of you is what I'm experiencing right now that is working for you is this. What I'm experiencing that is not working for you is this. And you don't have to agree with me, right? It's my experience. So fully taking ownership that it's just your experiences. You don't feel like, you don't think, it's not your opinion. It's what you're experiencing, and it's in that moment. Because our experience of every person is moment to moment. You might have an experience of me right now, that's something, and you might have an experience of me an hour from now that's completely different. So just knowing that it's like, we're just in this moment right now, and that's the feedback. And again, whether it lands for you or doesn't, I'm not attached. I'm just sharing my experience.
Yeah, that lands, because that's what I've been reading too about, like, speaking unarguably.
Mm-hmm.
Not being like, you always do this, or this is what you do. And then again, I just want to say this. We're going to mess up sometimes. We're going to fall into those old patterns of defensiveness, stonewalling, contempt, criticism. So, like, be patient and kind with yourself there. But I really love this. My experience of you is, or I have the thought that, like, making it unarguable.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it is a practice. Like, and it's, I do this with my son all the time. And, like, he has his like behaviors that are kind of like his default. And even though I know this and like I know how to just speak from my experience, I'm like, why are you being like this? You know what I mean? Like, and then it's like, oh shit, I didn't mean that, you know, repair, and go back. So it's like, yeah, it's having grace with yourself too, because it's like, yes, we don't want to hurt people, and sometimes, and we don't mean to, and sometimes we communicate in ways that are hurtful, and it creates what you just said, the defensiveness, the stonewalling, and all of that stuff.
Okay, so here's a question, because you touched on it at the beginning. We're in a culture of everybody walking on eggshells. So what happens when, well, I guess I'm going back. If you don't ask permission to give feedback, then maybe it's a dead end. But I'm thinking like people are saying, "Oh, you're hurting my feelings just by speaking your experience, your thoughts, quote unquote, your truth." There's people saying that these kinds of ideas are violent, or, you know, the misinformation situations going on. How do you navigate that? Or what are your thoughts on that? I'm not sure if I know.
My thoughts around that are really an invitation to get curious why you'd give your power away for somebody's opinion to hurt your feelings. Like, again, this is where like I think we're just way too sensitive. Like, I can't hurt your feelings without your permission. You can't hurt my feelings, and you can have your beliefs and your opinions, and that doesn't have to define how I feel about anything. I choose that. So yeah, my response to that would be just an invitation as to like getting curious what's going on for you that's creating hurt feelings inside you when somebody has a different opinion than you, or somebody offers you feedback. Like, that's information. Like, it's just information, and it's just something to get curious about. Again, it's not right or wrong, but we want to make everything right or wrong, good or bad, you're right, you're wrong, sides, all of that, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. See, that's true. That's right. Not you're right. And it's challenging. And then again, having grace when you get that feedback, because I still get triggered. I get emotionally flooded at times. And it's mostly when I feel like my like identity is at in some way being targeted, if that's the way to put it.
Totally. It's like, you know, you have to call yourself forward. It's like, now you heard something. So I don't know. It wasn't like that long ago. It was like 2 months ago. You and I were talking about it, and I presented a story, and I went into my story of what was going on. And so with love, you gave me feedback, and I was like, fuck. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I can say that, but it's like, no, Nicole, you hurt my feelings. It's like, no, fuck, I get to look at that. Sorry. I also swearing.
Oh, I swear. I swear. It's all good.
So it's like, okay, what's here for me? Like, there is something here for me. If I'm having a reaction like, oh, this, like, oh, right? Like what you were saying, like my physiology changed. I felt something in my body, like my stomach dropped, whatever. Okay, what's here for me? There is a message here for me. I get to look at that.
I want to touch on this too, because you know, when someone gives you that feedback or says something, and then you have that guttural like drop, and it's like, I think it's connected to like shame. It's like it can be, or it can be shame. I think that is the sign. And this is why I say, like, there is an element of informative shame. It's a sign that that's not what you want in your life. That's not really who you are, and there's something for you to look at. So I'm curious, without getting into details, with that information, what changed in your life, or what like, yeah, what action did you take, if that's the way to put it, without giving details?
So for me, that was just looking at, for that particular situation, how I was showing up. So I do believe we create our reality. I generate everything that's going on around me. So how I show up generates everything. So it was looking at, okay, like, how am I showing up in that situation where you just pointed out a blind spot? You know, where am I withholding? Where am I not asking for what I need? And correcting that, like just moving, like, okay, I recognize that I've not been honest, even like I haven't been asking for what I need here. So addressing that and actually changing the approach. And then, of course, that creates a different result. So,
Yeah, and I want to back up. Like, it's not because earlier on I was saying, like, giving people feedback from a place of neediness is very different than giving people feedback or asking for your needs to be met.
yes.
Like, neediness is something else. It's wanting someone to change fundamentally for you. Whereas asking, like, hey, this is something that would help meet my need, that is way more vulnerable because someone can say no to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you get to take that information if they don't want to meet your need, and you get to align with your heart and make a decision from there.
Exactly. Or even something as simple as like, maybe what you need is to ask for help. And so that rings true for me. I've been somebody who does not ask for help. I'm like, I can do this all by myself, and I can't. I can't. And so that's been a work in progress for me. It's stepping out and asking for help, and asking for help from all kinds of people now. Like that's another huge shift for me. Like I've been somebody who would just let balls drop because I would refuse to ask for help, versus it's like the more you expand and the more there's going on in your life and the more people you serve, you get to ask for support. Like that's just, otherwise you're only limited to what you can do, right? So yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and I think people don't ask for help because it's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, I
people
hated it. I hated it. It's true. It is. It's vulnerable. And for the long, like when you have when you're living in a self-protection mode all the time, I mean, you're not opening that space up very easily. So yeah.
I think that's one of the signs too that I noticed for myself when I'm living in self-preservation, which is baseline fear.
Yes.
It's closed off. You're not receiving from people. You're not letting the flow happen, because I think with interacting with people in that flow, everything gets exposed in your life. So if you're trying to hide from things, do you think, Kate, this is a question. Do you think that we truly, truly have blind spots? Or do we just avoid things until we can't avoid them anymore?
I think that we do. And if we're very deep in discovery, we will get there. But it still, I think, takes us longer to see them than it does somebody who is not vested and just sees it from an outside perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's because that's what it is. It's a blind spot for ourselves.
Yeah. And we're on autopilot so much.
Yeah.
Like so much of what we do is so automatic. I think that those blind spots really do exist because of that. And especially if we're in routines where nothing changes in our lives much day to day. That's why it's so uncomfortable. Like I feel so uncomfortable. Oh, Nicole knows my story. Right now is the last few weeks. I'm so freaking uncomfortable all day long. So my blind spots are flying in my face all day long because I'm changing things up. Like something is different every day. But when I'm in a routine that it's like I get up at the same time, I do the same thing, I come home, whatever, those blind spots just kind of there, but we don't see them because there is nothing to disrupt, right? So yeah.
Oh, that is so, I want to just highlight this because that is so insightful. We protect ourselves when we're in self-preservation from our blind spots. We create a life where we don't have to look at what's going on.
Yeah.
When we're stepping outside our comfort zone, interacting with different people, interacting with different circumstances, that is when everything's going to come up and be right in your face.
Yeah.
So yes, we have blind spots. However, we're very tricky in our survival mechanisms to create lives that either expose us to them or protect us from them.
Yeah.
In so many ways. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, 100%. Like I just, man, get in a different room with different people who are like a couple levels ahead, and you're starting seeing a different, like it's, you see all of a sudden it's just everything is so amplified and you're like, holy shit, I did not even see this before. So yeah, it's so fascinating.
I coined the term like the grief of growth. Sometimes I feel like when I'm growing, I have this like sadness because I am seeing stuff in myself and I'm like, oh man, I lived like that for so long. How do you does that resonate with you?
We've talked about this before, and I like, because you're like, I know, what you're saying, and like I understand it conceptually, and I think that that was something that I very much was experiencing like many years ago, and now, like, especially since Aiden was born, I've always just like, okay, what's next? I'm so excited. So it's like enjoying the moment, but not, because you're enjoying the moment, not grieving what was, and celebrating the expansion as opposed to grieving the old version. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
that grief element too is like probably a little bit steeped in like a pattern of shame or condemnation, like a little bit of punishment, like, oh, you should have known better back then. Well, I didn't. Now I do.
I didn't know exactly,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
now I know, and yay.
and yay, yay. Um, um, I'm curious your thoughts on let's dive a little bit more into intimacy, because I think
Okay.
the relationship between feedback and intimacy is really important. Um, can you describe what intimacy is for people? Because you've done this for me before. Yeah.
In my words.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the word, when you think about the word itself, intimacy, it's into me you see. So letting ourselves be seen, and with all the protection and the hiding, we don't let people see us, and so that's how we protect from the feedback, I think, too. And so true intimacy can't exist between two people if we don't see each other. Like, if I don't see you, your vulnerabilities, your dreams, your desires, your shame, whatever, right? Like, where's our bond? It's not based in truth, right? Because we're hiding parts of ourselves. So it's that whole trust and intimacy, so connected, like so connected.
What are your thoughts on something like a trauma bond versus true intimacy? Because I arguably what happens in a trauma bond is this idea of bonding over the trauma. So people would be like, they know my shame, they know the trauma that I've experienced. But there's, implications to that not being necessarily healthiest long term. What's the difference between like a trauma bond, in your opinion, and true intimacy in relationship?
Well, this is just my opinion. Um, there is no intimacy in a trauma bond. Like, I see a trauma bond play out in my family. So there are two people in my family, and they're trauma bonded, and I see this trauma bond replay every interactions, every family gathering. There is no intimacy there. Nobody knows the other person. Nobody is willing to get vulnerable, to actually say what's happening for them. And it's just, you would think it's feedback, maybe, and maybe in their opinion they're giving feedback, but it's just like spitballing insults at each other, and you're not, and in the blame and shame. So blame and shame underlies all of those exchanges. But I think that because it's such a norm, the emotions that get generated in the process, those addictive emotions come up, and so it feels like you're on a high until the next interaction. So I don't believe that there is intimacy in trauma bonding. I don't think that it exists in those relationships.
I think when you were saying this popped into my head too. I want to add on to that. Because when you're in a trauma bonded relationship, it's not actually who you are. It's you tying your identity to the trauma you've experienced. So those storyline loops get played, and as you alluded to, the highs and lows of the emotional state of whatever takes place. But it's not really who you are. Whereas when you tell me about trauma that you've experienced in your life, I see the highest level of Kasia.
Right.
So I'm seeing that person, not the person who I don't see you as the trauma. Maybe that's the difference too.
Yeah. And I think you just said story. I think with the trauma bonding, it's the reliving of the story. It's like we're retelling stories. And from my experience, like with these two people that I'm talking about, it always goes into the past. And I don't even like to use absolutes, but literally every interaction, it ends up in the past, 40 years ago, and we get high on the emotions of what was going on, and that's like it fuels the bond, but there is no healing, there is no intimacy, there is really no communication in any of those interactions. It's just, it's, I don't know, like for me at this point it's anxiety producing. But I was in that loop with them, you know, many years ago. I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, I see. So what you're hitting on is the trauma bond is like living in the past or the emotions, playing those stories. Or I
Yes.
have seen people in trauma bonds who are constantly living in the future.
Recreating.
Yeah, or like being like, we're gonna be happy when.
uh,
Once this happens, then so
yeah,
it's like these two worlds where there's a lack of presence. So you can't have intimacy without presence too.
right, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what does intimacy feel like then? If you were to describe like intimate relationship, what is that like?
Oh my God. So I'll just go back to the conversation you and I had, because before I went through my transformational experience, I always thought, well, yeah, I had this idea, and that was my belief, that intimacy is a word that pertains to romantic relationships. And you and I had this conversation. And I was like, and then I went through all of this, and I was like, oh my God, like why was I reserving it to that? And it was also like at that time labeling, like, this is my romantic relationship, this is my child relationship, these are my friendships. I'm like, no, they're all relationships, and they all get to be intimate. So so intimacy is just authenticity, vulnerability, letting ourselves be seen, and inviting the other people in our life to open up and be seen as well, because maybe they're not ready for that, but we get to care for them so much and love them so much that they feel eventually safe. Because I do believe with intimacy, there has to be safety first before we will open ourselves up and be intimate and let ourselves be seen. So inviting them and creating and modeling that there is safety here, there is trust here, and that's when intimacy can start to grow.
And to clarify too, intimacy there's no boundaries. In fact, as you said, safety
Yeah.
creates those boundaries. So intimacy doesn't mean just being like, whatever happens happens. I have whatever is right for you. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go, but it is it's that authenticity and that vulnerability. And you and I have had conversations about this because I've really I've created this in a lot of my work environments where people think like, no, work's work. You cut off what's going on. And I think there's certain work environments where that's the case, but I like to have intimacy when I'm working with people and creating. It's like my favorite thing. I love to be on a team. I love to work with people. And I think that's uncomfortable for people sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder, if it is uncomfortable for people because they live with the same notion that I was living with for so long, that there is like a crossing of boundaries. When we say intimacy, it's like, is it crossing a boundary? And just really understanding what it actually is, that it's not, actually, it has nothing to do with crossing any boundaries. It's just getting to really, really loving and caring about people. Yeah.
Yeah, and not and that's, I think, where the richness of life really comes in. Yeah, it's so fascinating. Um, is there anything else you feel really called to say on intimacy or feedback?
Well, tell me how you feel about feedback. What is your experience of us doing feedback, since we've started doing feedback the way that we do feedback?
We do feedback. We do feedback. Um, this is the biggest thing. This is what's coming into my head now. The biggest thing feedback has done for me, especially in our relationship and other close relationships, is it takes me out of my storyline loops. I really like storyline loops are so addictive.
Yes, it's so
Especially
fun.
they're so, oh, I want to live in that victim storyline, or that storyline, that ego storyline. That This is one of my favorites. Like I'm just so hard to get. Anybody knows I'm not hard to get. People get me pretty freaking quickly. But I'm like, people just, what? No, no. So feedback for me jolts me out of my storyline loops and gets me asking the question, what do I truly want to be?
Mm-hmm.
what stories do I want to live, and it gets me out of my like self-centeredness and in more service to others, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what feedback has done for me, and it feels just so good to go those places with people and then have them love you no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. How does it feel when like when you're receiving feedback and it's landing hard? Like what, like in our environment. So I just so people get it.
Okay.
Like the safety piece.
Okay. So in our environment, so
Yeah.
I'm like, this is, I gotta say, my hair is, I've been swimming in the ocean. There's no
Yay.
rules here. I'm having some vanity going on through this interview here. Anyway, just gotta get that off my chest here. Um, um, okay, when it's landing really hard, there's two kinds of landing really hard. One is like, oh, there's so much truth to it that it's actually a relief. It feels like there's a relief happening. And then there's the landing so hard that I feel that shame, that guttural shame. So there's kind of two that happen. In the environment of safety, though, mostly it's that, okay, this is really, it's an empowering feeling, actually, because the veil's being lifted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you don't have to live in that story anymore. But when you don't know what is possible, like what else is possible, maybe that's where the guttural, like fear, uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
shame can kind of come in. And again, the judgment of, oh, I've made this choice to live in this storyline loop for so long and it feels so comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
especially when you, this is what I will say to people who have done self-development. I find, especially when you can see that in other people and then it comes to your doorstep, sometimes it can feel, again, that little bit of that guttural, but mostly it's a relief.
Yeah.
It gets to be a relief in
Mm-hmm.
the, yeah.
Yeah.
But then I just say to you, okay, what do you think are some possible actions I could take? Or lack of actions, because sometimes it's about stillness, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's like initially there's like the little bit of panic, especially when it lands, like that. Oh, I get to look at this. So it's like because you can't hide it from it at that point, like you said. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. But then yeah, then it's a relief because it also those blind spots keep us in the stories, like you said, they keep us in the loop. So okay, now we have awareness. I'm like, okay, it's a relief because now I know how to break the freaking loop. I don't have to live there anymore. So I've been generating this result and now I can move it because I didn't actually like what I was generating over here.
Okay, I have, this is actually a really, I want to ask you this question because we've talked about this too. I get addicted though to criticizing other people's story loops. I have the thought that I have a bit of an addiction at times to ruminating on other people's story loops and being like, I got to give them feedback, or like, trying to fix people. How do you know when that is helpful or not helpful? Like how do you navigate that? Does that make sense?
So are you asking like how to navigate your own thought process or actually approaching people with feedback?
Both. Like how do you know when it's to actually approach people with feedback versus when I'm just addicted to the thought loop of like, yeah, of criticizing someone in my mind, essentially.
Yeah, I think it comes down to intention, right? So when we find ourselves in that situation and we're like either criticizing or we just, I really want to give this person feedback. So sitting back and just like, okay, well, what's my intention? Like, what am I in service to this person? Is my intention to be in service? Because honestly, that is the biggest thing I think if I could land it about feedback, it's about being in service to the other person. So if we go back to the intention, I want to give you feedback. Is this in service of the other person? If yes, I would listen to it. If no, then I would see what else is going on. Like, why am I, again, maybe it just feels good, right? Because it triggers something in us that we're like, it's a familiar feeling. We're generating a familiar feeling by looping a story in our head, whatever that is. So when we get back to the intention, and is this about me or is it about them? And if it's about me, then take a pause and get curious about what's going on there.
Yeah, and like I'm thinking about also stuff that's going on in the world. This idea of misinformation and people sometimes feeling like, no, people need to know this information about whatever that is, or even self-development, feeling the need to tell people that information. Again, as you're saying, getting really clear, is this to serve them or is it to serve me, to somehow feel self-righteous or right or fix someone? Yeah, it's a challenge. Because again, like if I have a truth that's true, but I guess it goes back to asking permission. I'm looping to the beginning of our conversation now because I'm like, there's so many things I want to say to people, like, you need to know this.
Yeah.
But if they're not open to it, yeah.
And really, if you're in a conversation with somebody and this takes courage, 100%. I think it takes so much courage to give feedback, like honest feedback from service. When you're in a conversation with somebody and it's like in the moment and you're really seeing something and you're really connected that, oh my gosh, this person, it would serve them. Like I can serve them by giving feedback. So and so, hey, are you open for feedback? Like I'm seeing something. Can I have your permission to share? Yes or no? And you're not attached, right? They say no thanks. Okay. They say yes with love. My experience of you right now in this moment is this. And so we get to, but that takes courage. Like 100%. I sometimes like, it will take me a few seconds to like build up the nerve to ask for the permission, right? And then I know it's about me because I'm scared, right? I'm scared. That's why the only reason why I wouldn't do it is because I'm scared. And really it's about them because I see an opportunity.
You're hitting the nail on the head. If you're scared to give the feedback because you're scared they're going to leave you, not be your friend, fire you, or whatever it is, that's a good signal that staying silent and not asking at least for permission to give feedback is about you. It's not and what's best for them. I'm going to use this example too, like, because remember I was saying like, my reels, like, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, can I give you feedback? And I was like, yep. And I felt nervous. And you're like, sometimes your reels feel like you're imitating something else. It's not really you. And, my light went off. I just told Sean, I was like, I wonder how long this light will last. Hold on a second. We're almost wrapping up. I have a charger though here. Or not. Okay, well, we'll wrap up here soon. I was nervous. I was nervous about that feedback, but because you did that, I went and looked back at my past reels. I recognized, oh yeah, because I've been watching certain people, and then I adjusted, and also had so much compassion that when you're learning something new, sometimes you're gonna be in an imitation mode, right?
Yeah. And I think we all do that to some extent too. Like when we had that conversation, it's like when we really look up to somebody or we're like gleaning from somebody's wisdom and it's really landing, we almost like our voice changes a little bit, maybe our mannerisms change a little bit, and we start to, and I think it's normal. A lot of people do it. And it's just when we start to, like when our brand is, obviously our brand is us. So in your case, like you're your brand. So then like maybe the reels reflected something back, right?
Totally. Okay, how can people find you, work with you if you have something open for that? Like what does that look like?
So I have very limited capacity. So I'm only like, if you're interested in leadership training, leadership coaching, I have very few spots every month open, and we require to get on the phone to see if it's a fit. That's the only way to get in. So you can DM me on Instagram, or there is a link in my bio with my calendar, so you can book a consultation call and we can see if that's a fit. And you can also DM me your email address if you'd like to get on my email list. That's where I communicate with my community the most. I communicate through email. That's where I'm able to give more coaching, more robust amounts of information than in a story that disappears in 24 hours. So that's the best place. Instagram at Coach Kasia Bradford. that's where you can find me.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kasia. I love our conversation so much. And we'll have many more, I'm sure.
Of course.
Behind the scenes.
Love you, friend.
Sometimes we're more like we did swear a bit today. So
I did. I was doing so good.
No,
then...
I like it. Sometimes when we're having conversation, I'm like, this should be public. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you for all of your feedback. And I'm going to send you a big, long feedback after this Instagram. No, I'm just joking.
Perfect. I'm here for it.
Okay.
I'm here for it.
Okay. Love you.
Okay. Love you. Bye.